Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at my Phalaenopsis golden leopard. This one originally came to me as a no ID, but eventually I was able to see the same orchid being offered at the same channel, the same local grocery store with a tag. So I learned that this orchid is now called golden leopard. So here it is, golden leopard. If we go back in time, in 2019, around mid-September, it was still growing leaves and roots, but then toward the end of 2019, I started to see its first spike emerging, and that was super encouraging because this orchid kind of stopped growing for a little bit for some reason, no roots, no new leaves, and then it started to pick up. So I guess it just wanted to rest. Toward the end of January 2020 was when I started to see another spike emerging. So it's super great for me. I was so excited because this orchid, even when I first purchased it, it was blooming on a single spike. So I thought this orchid is only capable of producing one flower spike at a time, but this time it's producing 2 flower spikes, so it's actually pretty exciting for me to see. So mid-March 2020 was when this orchid really started to, I guess, try to mature its buds, and it started to plump up. And this is the time that I started to only use water with no fertilizer, because with water culture orchids, this one is not in full water culture, by the way. I actually allow my water culture orchids to have a couple dry days if possible. So this one, even with just, water culture orchids that have dry days, I try not to mess around with the fertilizer too much when it's in bud. And my theory and my personal preference / theory is that because the solution is, the roots are in the solution pretty much all the time except the last 2 to 3 days, and the fertilizer is always in a way available to the roots until the solution is evaporated. So even with really weak concentration, say 25%, you may still be giving it more than it needs. The fact that it has enough energy to put out flower spikes and buds to want to flower, I think the orchid has enough energy to be able to carry itself through the entire flowering cycle. So that's kind of my logic with water culture orchids and their blooming. So when this orchid started to mature or plump up its buds, I stopped using fertilizer. Only use water for this orchid. And we know Phalaenopsis orchids sometimes can potentially be sensitive to environmental changes, and that really means, for example, change of temperature, humidity, or the fact that you're moving around so much you're moving this orchid around so much, it may give you bud blasts. And this is what happened with this orchid. I did not move this orchid at all when it was in spike and in buds. I knew it was giving me 2 flower spikes, so I really wanted to make sure that I don't disturb it, so I didn't move this orchid. And because I've had this orchid for quite some time and using the same water culture method, so I know exactly how much water I need to provide, and I only gave it 1/4 cup of water every single time. So there was definitely no moving around. And then you can kind of see, okay, if it's still having bud blast, then what is it? So it's really temperature or humidity. I think this orchid was suffering a little bit from dryness of my environment. And then at that time, end of April, my environment at that time in our state, it was kind of hot and dry, and then all of a sudden you will have some chilly days. So I think it's because of the temperature as well as the humidity issues that caused the buds to blast. So in the end, double spikes, which gave me a great deal of excitement, really only had 3 flowers to go on with. So it gave me some excitement, but it also definitely gave me some disappointment too. But it is what it is, and sometimes having bud blast is just part of the package, part of the orchid growing experience, and there's no way around it. Other than, if you already do what you can and still having bud blast, you just have to accept what it is. Now, in terms of, the roots, you can see in the video, there are lots of new roots growing. With water culture, this one, because there are already some roots attaching to the side of the cup, so if I don't have to, I don't take this orchid out anymore. And when it's growing new roots, and as the roots are approaching or about to touch the cup, I would really pay close attention to see if the roots is directly growing downward or potentially it's coming back up. And if it's coming back up, I would definitely set alarms to remind myself to observe the roots every day, because when the time is right, you really want to push it down so that you kind of guide it to grow down into the cup. Because I'm not taking the orchid out anymore, because there are lots of roots that are already anchoring itself to the cup. So unless I have to, I don't really want to disturb those roots. So by pressing new roots down, by guiding it to grow down, you then can have a better chance of avoiding having to take this orchid out or repot it just because of new roots growing directly out of the cup. And that's what I did. And so far that has worked really well. So if you want to give it a try, just set yourself some alarm reminders on your phone to really look at observe the orchid roots every day as they are growing, as they're growing near the edge of the cup, and use your finger or some tools to make sure that it grows down. Now, this is the bonus footage. This is the orchid video footage from 2019. One single spike, but at least it had 5 flowers. It might have had that one bud blast for the first bud because it kind of grew too early. But other than that, this orchid was really sturdy and has been pretty sturdy. I even remember the first rebloom, I said to myself, gosh, this orchid is so sturdy. I mean, I moved it around, I, dump out the water by tilting it, moving it, and making videos sometimes requires me to having to move around the orchid somewhat, but no bud blast whatsoever. So it has always been a sturdy orchid, but this year I just cannot believe that it had so many bud blasts. So this is the video from 2019 as a reference and comparison point. I do have this question from a subscriber, so I'll use this opportunity to answer it. And that is, with water culture orchids, whether full water culture or semi-water culture, when your orchid roots are having issues, for example, rotting, what do you do? The easiest way is dump out the water, stop watering, let the orchid roots dry for a couple of days. So once it's, dried up and formed scab, or at least the rotting portion is dried up, you can trim those off and then gradually reintroduce water. So that's what I do, and it has worked really well so far. But before root rot issue occurs, I think the best way with water culture is you set a predetermined amount of water and learn about your orchid and the amount of water that it needs, and only provide that amount versus, you know, giving it extra and having to dump out, because I think that's a better way to provide additional stability, and then, you know, automatic dry period for the orchid roots to be able to breathe. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!